Good evening, my name's Emily Huntercoat. I'm the project officer for this project. Alpine Better Places in Harrietville and in other places in the Shire is all about revitalising our townships, the open spaces and the streetscapes. Tonight we have Andrew and Edward from NDG Landscape Architecture, who are our design consultants for this project. And I'm going to be handing over to them tonight to walk us through the plans, and then followed by a question time. So we'll allow people to put some questions to the designers to answer directly. The way that we'll do that tonight is down the bottom of your screen. You'll see that you can raise your hand, and that will give me a little indicator here to turn on your, there you go, Ron's put his hand up. So then I'll be able to turn on your microphone and you'll be able to ask a question of the designer. So the reason that we're doing that is because there's so many people in the room and we can't see each other, it becomes otherwise a bit difficult with people cutting in because of the technology. It's just better if we control it in that way to give everyone their time to speak. If you've got any other questions that you want to just put forward to us towards the end when we're running out of time, I'll give a bit of time through the Q&A function for you to type through your questions. We might not get to everything this evening, but we would endeavour to give responses to all the questions that are put forward to us. So I'll make sure that we put some time aside at the end for you to just type through some questions if we run out of time to answer them live tonight. Our webinar tonight is being recorded, so that will go up on the council's website for anyone that misses out tonight if they weren't able to be with us. So Andrew, if you would like to get started.
Sure. Thank you for coming, everyone, out or in or wherever you are. This would have been a lot easier to do face-to-face, but nonetheless, we appreciate your time. We had a good session with the Toowoomba residents last night and ran a similar sort of session to try and get their feedback on the plans. Ed and I from MDG, we're involved in the previous phases of Alpine Better Places projects of Bright, Myrtleford and Porpunka. So we were instrumental in what you see on the ground there. And for all of those three projects, the community engagement was a very important and strong part of those projects. We ran a number of sessions to get to the bottom of what it was that the community felt were the priorities for the township, essentially where they saw that money should be spent and focus should be made. And then a follow-up session afterwards that was really to get further feedback once the plans had been a bit further progressed. So we're here to hear tonight. We're here to listen tonight, to try and get from you as many thoughts and comments as we possibly can. It comes out of a really good briefing session that Ed and I had back in March with the community focus group, and we appreciated the time that was spent then to give us a really good background and summary of the issues that are prevalent in Harrietville. Obviously, we don't know the town as well as you do, so that's why we are here to listen and to be able to get your feedback. Essentially, the question that we asked at the time when we met in March was, what could you do? What do you think should be done to make your township better? And that's really a little bit about what we're trying to get to the bottom of tonight, to establish where the priorities are. These projects are not just about beautification, they're about improving, obviously, the aesthetics of the township, but they're also aimed at improving the functionality and the workings of the township. What I'd like to do now is to share my screen so I can talk you through the presentation. So hopefully you should be able to see this, which is a summary of the three-step process. So we are right here where the red line is. So step one has been some initial site investigations, visiting the site a number of times, reading all of the background material, research, and essentially compiling what we would call a site analysis plan. What we're reviewing tonight is that information here. From that, we move on to step 2 in due course, which is where we start to put proper design ideas on the table. So what we're seeing tonight is not a design proposal. It's more just some suggestions of potential projects. Step 2 really entails the stage where we go into more detail. We have a bit more certainty about where the money should be spent within Harrietville. We then start to refine the design proposal, review it with council, start some costing information, and then there is another opportunity for you as the community to be able to provide feedback at this point here. And that then provides us a really good footing to move on to step 3, which is the final step in this process, where we have what we're calling final detailed concept plans. So plans that are very detailed. They provide the aesthetic outcome proposed, and we deal with things like planting and paving materials and a suite of furniture and all of the sort of construction detailing that from an aesthetic perspective. We have inputs from traffic engineers and quantity surveyors that are part of our team. So we deal with lighting as well. So at the end of step 3, we have detailed concept plans that are then suitable for council to be able to seek funding and then move on to the construction documentation plans that will be prepared that are needed to be able to build any of the works. I'm going to go to what is basically an analysis plan. Now, one of the things to say is that all of the plan information that you're seeing tonight is essentially the same information as the information that has been put up on council's website. We've basically sort of peeled the layers away and we're going to present it bit by bit, which hopefully will make it a little bit clearer to see. But it's really the same information that, that is contained on the handout that is on council's website. So this is the analysis. This is a summary of our observations and our findings, I guess, of spending time in Harrietville. The plan that you see there is the aerial photograph as it exists. So just the aerial, you know, the view. If you were to look at Google Maps, this is what you would see. Importantly, the coloured area is the study boundary. So this is the definitive area that council have given us as the scope of this project. So I guess we're not talking about areas that are in the black and white here. We're looking at the zone within the coloured areas there. And it might help if I explain some of the symbols and the codes that are shown on this plan. Let's start with the purple. So the purple dots represent where we see as being existing key town features or destinations or areas of interest or sort of markers within the township. So obviously Dredge Hole, Pioneer Park, the museum, the community hall, destinations, if you like, within the township. The orange dot is where we perceive that there are potentially vehicle and pedestrian issues or opportunities to address some of the vehicle movement issues. This dot up here, for instance, talks about the fact that to us it's a little bit confusing as to which way to go, whether it's a straight ahead movement or a left-hand movement if you're coming from that direction. So some opportunity there to improve vehicle and pedestrian movements in those areas. The red dashed line here indicates the extent of existing footpaths and really within the main street area. So it's quite illuminating actually to see that there is a footpath here from the Snowline Hotel all the way up through here, but footpaths missing on other parts of the roadway. So we'll talk about that a little bit later when we look at opportunities for joining up some of those missing links, as it were. A little bit hard to see on this plan on the screen that I've got here, but we've also plotted all of the existing walking trails that sort of lead into the township, and that's another thing that we would like to talk about. The vision statement. So as outlined in the our future strategy master plan in 2016, the aim was that Harrietville would be strong and resilient. It would have a robust population, it talked about Harrietville having a heart and a range of facilities that meet the needs of the community, the natural environment being an integral part of the lifestyle and to support people's livelihoods. So I think from the outset, one of the things I'd like to say is that it's a beautiful place, and the rural charm and the character of Harrietville is something that is really quite special. And we heard from the community that we've spoken to so far and through the reports that we've read that the desire is to keep a sort of slightly informal, naturalistic character rather than the sort of curb and channel and the more suburban type of development that happens in so many townships. So that's something that we've been mindful of as we have done our work and have got some ideas to show you. Just quickly on this plan also, if you notice this faint dashed line here is a detailed zoom in that we'll look at. So some of the plans cover this extent and other plans are zoomed out to cover the entire study area extent. But let me talk you through the 9 potential projects, 9 ideas that we've had as outlined on the information that is on Council's website. I'll talk them through one by one. Now we've actually grouped a couple of them because there is some synergy with some of these potential objectives. So this is talking about item A and item C. So item A, if we look at the image on the top there, a Pioneer Park as it presents to anyone driving into the area, we really see that there's a great opportunity there to just to have a rethink about the extent of road pavement there. If there's any way that it can be made a bit more attractive and a bit more like a park rather than a car park, that's first and foremost in our minds. And then another view here of, again, an area that seems to be fairly much dominated by pavement. So I'll go to the plan. Okay, so this is that zoom in plan that we spoke about. This is sort of at a bigger scale as we look at Pioneer Park itself. First observation is it seemed as though Tavaret Park and Pioneer Park were almost 2 separate entities, as though they were 2 separate parks. And we see a real opportunity to be able to draw the 2 of them together to make the park feel as a singular sort of gesture. I guess in doing that, it seemed to us that the identification of a heart or a focus or a real destination within Harrietville, it seemed to be a logical place to create that as the, in a sense, not quite the geographic heart of Harrietville, but certainly a very important piece of open space, of public open space that you have. Reading through some of the lists here, there is the potential for some selective vegetation removal to be able to open up some of the views both into the park and then across the park, so that it does feel as though it's, I guess in summary, it sort of feels as though it's a park of 2 halves. A beautiful character on this side with lovely mature trees and grassland. And then on this side here, it feels a little bit as though, as I said, it's dominated a bit too much by road pavements. So there is an opportunity to address that. We're thinking also that there is a potential here to rethink some of the configuration of the amenities here, the toilet block, or potentially even a shelter structure there that would be something that would enable people to come to this point, especially visitors I'm thinking of at this time, visitors that would be able to come to this point, obtain some information about where to go and what to see in Harrietville, almost as a first stop, and even use it as a picnic area. And if there was the ability for someone to be able to come, get all of the information that they need and then move on, this seemed like a logical place to be able to put that sort of information and facilities that would encourage people to use this area. I guess in a sense, it's not dissimilar to, if you think of the shelter structure that we put into Porpunka along the main street there. I remember it well before that shelter went in. and it sort of seemed as though it lacked a bit of a heart or a focus. And we felt strongly that the insertion of that shelter really gave people a reason to be in that parkland. It activated that side of the street. In a similar way, what we did at Porepunkah was to remove vast areas of the former Great Alpine Road that were not necessary from a vehicle circulation perspective, and essentially turned the grey into green in a fairly large gesture there. So that's some of the thinking behind what is the potential for this part of Pioneer Park. The other potential project here is to, I guess if you like, sort of link up all of the various trails that exist around Harrietville and bring them to one point, wherever that may be, and this seems to be a logical location to do that. Drag them into one point so that there can be all of the trails essentially would emanate from the one point. And again, that idea of providing visitor information and a stop and a start point for the trails seemed to be a really good idea. I'm going to show you some images now. So I should say that the images here are really intended more as benchmarking rather than specific design proposals. If we look here, these are the two images of Porepunkah, the shelter that I just spoke about, but some other alternative images of essentially trying to create something that is contemporary, a really well-resolved landscape outcome, and public open spaces that really work very well. They're visually evident where to go and how to move through them. Circulation is really important. And then some ideas around signage and the ability for the signage to have a definitive start and an end. So there we have two potential projects. The next two to talk about are a potential to announce the entry into into Harrietville itself, and then also draw on some of the identity and the unique characteristics of Harrietville in doing that. This is so if you can just see there, that's the school bridge. This road takes you down to Dredge Hole Precinct. This road takes you further along into Harrietville itself. So there's a real point here at which one would ask themselves, do I go straight ahead or turn left? We think there is a real opportunity here to brand Harrietville, to create a sense of identity and really leave no doubt in people's minds that they are entering Harrietville itself. I think also to the signage that we have done at Porepunkah, and as I said last night to the residents of Tawonga, before that sign went in, it would be very easy to just drive straight past Porepunkah and head towards Bright. But really the signage is an attempt to provide a local reference. So it talks about the timber milling industry that's part of Porepunkah's history, but a very visual and bold marker at that point. And you can judge for yourselves whether that works, but our observation and the feedback that we've had anecdotally is that it really does announce Porepunkah in a far stronger way. So there's a real opportunity to do that here for Harrietville. We're talking about, if I go to the plan, we're really talking primarily about this area here. As I said, the sense of announcing that entry into the heart of Harrietville and the sort of the main part of the township. There's a real opportunity there. There's also another opportunity to add a couple of other locations in possibly a lesser order than the main town signage, but is to do some, I guess, sort of labeling and denoting of the key town features, essentially. There's quite a bit of signage already in Pioneer Park. I think I've counted definitely 2, possibly 3 different vintage signs of differing vintages. There is an opportunity to just rethink that local identity. One of the things that we're very keen on is to propose a design outcome, and this talks to the notion of identity and creating a unique style or a brand for Harrietville. We want to get to the bottom of what it is that makes Harrietville special and unique and different from Bright or Myrtleford or Porepunkah or Tawonga. So part of our next investigation will be to try and get to the bottom of the unique qualities that Harrietville has and build that into some of the design responses that we're proposing. It's very important to us that the design outcomes are not just generic landscape ideas that could have come from anywhere in the world. We try and find the essence of a place, what it is that makes Harrietville special and unique, and build upon that as a character, and really try and use that as an identity to reinforce the brand, if you like, of Harrietville. So back to talking about the entries, we've got some images here. That's the sign that I was talking about in Paulpunka, and some other ideas about bold, striking, wayfinding signage that can be used in the township. The next two categories, or potential projects, or areas that could require, could do with some upgrade, is we're calling it the historical information curation, a rather long-winded term. But I guess what we're getting at is, especially in Pioneer Park, there's quite an amount of historical information and artifacts and historical pieces. It's actually really interesting. I find it interesting to read the history and to understand a bit more about Harrietville's history by looking at these items. I guess the question we've asked ourselves is there a better place for them to be? And is there some curation that could be undertaken, some editing, and essentially sort of filtering out some of the elements so that it doesn't sort of become a bit too overwhelming for a visitor? So it's in a plan view sense, I guess essentially what we're saying is there an opportunity to relocate some of the elements that exist within Pioneer Park and bring them down to the museum, or at least some sort of clever editing of that material. The information boards that are around the town, I've read every single one of them, and they're very informative. It's interesting history. I just think that there could be a more contemporary and a more sort of holistic way of doing that. So if we look at some of the potential images, some really clever ways of still having a lot of historical data and information, some text, some visual, but there is an opportunity for that information to be portrayed in a slightly different way, basically. And the museum to us presents a really good opportunity for some of that information to be consolidated. The next two are talking about the main street itself, as we see from an image such as that. We ask ourselves the question, what can be done to improve the aesthetic and the functionality of that main street? And then also the community hall precinct. Now this is quite a strategic image here because it does show just how hidden the community hall is from the main street. So I go to the plan, which is the overall plan. So again, we're back at that bigger scale. And so we're talking about upgrades possibly to all of the main street here, and specifically around the community hall area. The character of the tree plantings in Harrietville are just absolutely beautiful. You probably see them every day and don't really recognize it, or hopefully it registers to you. But for coming from Melbourne, that character is really special, and definitely to be preserved and to be reinforced and enhanced. So there is the potential for some infills of trees to occur. Trees don't last forever, so some succession planting would be a really good idea. Do you remember on the analysis plan, there was a big orange dot right here. So that talks to the fact that it is quite dangerous at times to cross the roadway. So we ask ourselves the question, is there an opportunity to actually make it a bit safer for pedestrians to cross between certainly two town identity markers or destinations, by way of potentially even reducing the road width a little bit so that it narrows the pavement width somewhat. There is the opportunity, I'm not sure if you can quite see it on this plan, but that sort of dashed black line talks of streetscape upgrade, things like pavements and street furniture and bins and bike racks and drinking fountains and that sort of thing, that there is the potential to insert some of that through the main street. Street lighting could be investigated. This line here, if you can remember the analysis plan that had sections of footpath, but then sections without footpath, there's an opportunity here to infill some of those gaps and to provide a more continuous connection from one area to another. And then the hall, which some of these images talk to the fact that it could become a really interesting and vibrant community destination, could be opened up a lot more to the main street, and, you know, being able to house community events and I guess giving it a bit more of a civic status, a bit more prominence within the streetscape. Some lovely images of continuous tree planting boulevards and really well considered avenues of trees, minimizing road pavement where it's unnecessary, getting rid of sort of unsightly verges that are really neither roadway nor footpath. So those sorts of improvements are a potential. And the last one, so we're up to item number 9 here, is the whole dredge hole precinct. You know it well enough, obviously, so those images probably come as no surprise. So we're talking about really all of that area there on the plan. First thing is, wouldn't it be nice if there was a pathway that connected a bit more strongly through on this side here? There are potential thoughts around some car parking and improving visitor parking and circulation. And I guess one of the nice things about what could happen in this area is that some of the character of this park here could be brought into this park. So you could almost extend that lovely inviting green park character down into this area here. So it becomes another draw card, another attraction for Harrietville. And then some images of the sorts of character that park could have. So then we put all of that together, and this is essentially the summary plan that runs through the 9 potential projects. When we ran the community engagement sessions for Bright and Bright and Myrtleford and Porpunka, we actually had that was in the good old days when we could meet together and be face to face and look at a big plan on the wall. We asked people to put coloured dots on the plan in order of what they perceived as being the priority, 1, 2 or 3. And it was really good because we got a very good graphic visual of where we saw people thinking that the priority should be, where money should be spent, basically. So I guess in a sense, we're trying to do the same thing tonight, is to understand from you which of those 9 potential projects you see as being ones that really would warrant another layer of investigation and study. Bearing in mind that we've got quite a big study area. We didn't really talk much about the recreation reserve, but obviously council would be, we're not really able to fix up everything in the entire large study area. So we do need to prioritise expenditure. We have our own thoughts, obviously, but we're keen to hear from you where you think the funding should be spent, basically. So Emily, that's probably all I have to say about that plan there.
Great.
I might just, if it would help, I can bring up the plan that has been up on council's website as so that people can see that.
That would be good. I think that will make it easier as we go through some of the questions.
Okay.
And while we're on that, we took on board, there were a couple of businesses that were labelled incorrectly, and we've corrected that in this plan, yes. But if there's any other incorrect labels and things, please don't hesitate to get in touch and let us know. As Andrew said, he's not from Harrietville, and there might be some things that he's not aware of or has taken information from somewhere that's no longer valid. So we'll start off with our questions. We had some really good questions from Linnell, but she's had to leave us. But her question, which I believe Francine will probably be in a good position to answer this, was there doesn't seem to be a clear vision for the end of this process. What's the driver? What's the push for ideas? Where can we go back a few steps? She just seems a bit confused about what direction we're going in. So Francine, if you could speak to that.
Yes, so hopefully everyone can hear me. Francine Stacey, I'm Manager of Asset Development at Alpine Shire Council. So some of us met in the hall at Harrietville quite a few months ago, but I guess it was worth reiterating what the point of this project is. And really, at the end of the day, we want to produce detailed concept plans for the township that illustrate, estimate and prioritise township improvement works. So in the past, there's been a framework study done for Harrietville quite a few years ago. There was a lot of work done around the VASP project a few years ago, where the local community identified lots of different projects. But what we're trying to do with the Alpine Better Places project is sort of spatially bring that all together in the one set of plans and set of cost estimates that really looks at what the priority is for the town. If funding was available, where would we spend that money? Like, you know, where do we spend it first? We obviously can never deliver everything, but and that's why we ask, you know, what is it that the community wants and in what order of delivery do you want it? So just to give you an idea, I think I might have mentioned this back in the hall meeting, but the upgrades to Pulpunkas Town Centre, for example, were in the order of $1.7 million. So we will seek, as a council, will seek funding, external funding to deliver that project. And what these concepts will help us to do is to enable us to secure that funding, hopefully in the future. So we go through a process of this community engagement so that we have that commitment or acceptance by the community that this is the priority for their town, and we can demonstrate that to our the funding bodies that can provide these funds to do this work. So hopefully that helps to answer what the purpose of this project is and where we want to end up.
Great. I am going to ask Fiona if you would like to ask your question. You had a question about drainage, so I'll just turn on your speaker. Ooh. Fiona, if you'd like to unmute your...
Okay.
Yeah, there you go. Go for it.
Thank you. My questions have really been around drainage throughout the whole town, because I think that we need to get this right before we can do anything else. Otherwise, some of the other works might just be surface works, and some of those focus around on the map as we're looking at it around the area of B, and also somewhat in the Tavaray Park, where the runoff comes down from Feathertop Track and just spills out into the park, making the park unusable during raining. And then also around, where's Bella's Cafe? Or the existing walkway, there's some drainage issues there. And I just think that if the projects, however they come about, can focus on firstly that drainage issue, it makes it really unwelcoming from a visitor perspective to have to walk through puddles, especially that intersection from the Great Alpine Road and Feathertop Track at section B on the map, that will stay there for days after a rainfall. And, you know, that crossroad. And also as part of that drainage is, if you have an event, where do people park? I note that Andrew spoke about, you know, he was focusing on how that a lot of Pioneer Park was, you know, what am I?
Road pavement.
Yeah, pavement, but there's a certain amount of pavement that's needed because we need parking in the area. Because when we have an event, you know, traffic comes down to one lane worth of traffic, and it poses a risk to personal safety and also vehicular interaction with those pedestrians. So I'm just hoping that this process actually looks at those aspects to mitigate those risks, look at the drainage issues, as well as making it more functionable.
Yes, absolutely. Can I quickly respond to that one, Fiona? This project really would fail if it didn't address some of those basic fundamental functional considerations. So, you know, if you end up with a beautiful park, but it still floods, it's really of no use to anyone. So absolutely, that would be part of this project. We probably deal with the more detailed engineering drainage solution a little bit further down the track, but it's certainly the sorts of things that we've had to deal with in the other 3 townships. You know, think of all of the flooding in Myrtleford and the need for any park that is close to the centre of Myrtleford to be taking into account the flood levels through there. So it's something that we'd be serious about, and the point is taken that we do need to fix that as part of the project.
Thanks, Andrew, because there is 2 points within that Tavaray Park where the drainage just spills into the park. So if you've ever had the opportunity to be there through a significant rain event, you'll understand what I'm talking about.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you for that, Fiona. Next time there's a big rain event, I'll head down into Harrietville so I can see it for myself. I would also like to say some of these drainage issues could also be addressed in our annual maintenance process. They might not necessarily need to wait until some of these bigger projects happen. But yeah, if we'll record all of these and have a look at them and how they might fit within the project, or whether they could just be something that's a part of our normal drainage maintenance process. All right. Sarah N has also left, but her question, are you including the historic display in the concept for the Central Park, Tavaray and Pioneer combined? So I suppose, Andrew, are you wanting to put a combined historical display in the park, or you're talking about putting it at the museum which exists currently?
It's a good question. I think intuitively there's already an amount of historical information collated at the museum. I think it can be a bit of both. There's actually quite a bit of information that is on display, really. The park is in some ways a logical place to put some of that information. But at the same time, you know, the museum potentially has a function to showcase some of that material. So I guess to answer the question, and I'm really not answering it, I recognise, that's the sort of thing that we can drill down into the next level of detail when we get into a bit more of a specific proposal. We do need to probably catalogue all of the historical plaques and the information that sits within the 2 parks, so that we can sort of make informed proposals to you as the community about what stays and what goes. But we'd love to hear some feedback about which of those elements, and there are quite a few of them, you know, ranging from the big log through to the gold diggers through to the water wheel. Love to get some sort of feedback about which you see as being the most important and pivotal for the township.
Great. Councillor Forsyth had a question. I'll put your speaker on, Councillor. If you'd like to turn your speaker on, John, there you go.
Yes, my speaker should be on now.
Yep.
Look, you could read the question out. It's a straightforward one. Traffic through Harrietville, I'm assuming would probably just be heading, the majority of traffic going through Harrietville would be heading towards Hotham or Dinner Plain. I don't know what the traffic counts are. I don't know whether that's been done yet. I don't know how many actually stop off. So my question is regarding the access to good parking, especially for maybe RVs and or caravans within this section, so that people can get out of their car, meander and or get to the CBD businesses.
Yes, I think just broadly, visitor car parking is a very important thing to get right. You've seen through Myrtleford where we've essentially a single lane of traffic has been removed all the way through on both sides of the street through the centre of Myrtleford. Now that hasn't stopped the car parking from functioning, and there's really no point in my mind of creating a really lovely destination and enticing people to come and use the parks and to stop off at Harrietville and to use the toilets and to go and buy something from the shops. there's no point getting all of that right if we don't get the car parking right. So it's definitely something that is going to be on our radar. We have a traffic consultant as part of our team that will help us to identify the best locations for visitor car parking, and an even spread of it. So it's definitely something that we need to consider as part of this project.
Thank you, Councillor. I will put the next question out from Julie, if you'd like to turn your speaker on. Have we lost her? Julie, are you there? I might read her question out. How does this project connect the rail trail extension, which is currently a project that's underway? And will you be looking at connecting the paths and precincts in this plan to the rail trail?
The study area really is quite well defined. So if the rail trail comes within this area here, then definitely we have the opportunity to link it all together. If the rail trail is sort of a little bit further out of town and needs to be brought in, then that wouldn't necessarily be part of this project. It is, as I said before, we've been given quite a clear boundary of what the scope of this project is. So anything that occurs within this boundary, we're happy to look at and would be incorporating. Anything beyond that really doesn't fall within the remit of this project.
Next question was from John Gitsakis. John, would you like to turn your speaker on?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah, look, it's a bigger picture question about how relevant is the planning scheme, and to what extent do the final designs, plans of whatever is decided on, how do they fit into the planning scheme or not? And is that a potential barrier at some point, or do there need to be amendments made? But it's a sort of question around the scheme, and is it relevant or not to whatever is decided for the designs?
That might be a Francine question.
It might be.
Okay. I think the majority of the projects that we'd be looking at in Harrietville are within public land, so either in road reserve or on Crown land or council reserve. So I don't think any of the projects that we've potentially identified so far would be impacted by the planning scheme in terms of their zoning. Obviously, there's always other planning considerations such as native vegetation removal, cultural heritage and things like that. So they're always part of the process in terms of getting those approvals through. But yeah, generally no major barriers in the planning scheme.
Right. No hidden surprises. That's the point of my question, is that, you know, we go through the process, the community prioritises whatever those things are. We don't want to find out at some later stage that there's yet another extended time frame to amend schemes or other approvals, I suppose. So if there is the chance of any of those popping up, if they can be identified by council sooner rather than later.
Yep, that's a good point. And I think it'd be worthwhile us asking MDG to do a bit of due diligence over that, just to double check. Yep.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Fiona, you had a really great question about the identity of Harrietville, or probably more comment if you'd like to speak to that. You'll have to unmute your microphone, Fiona. No, she's... Oh. I might read it out. Fiona said, our branding is definitely gold history. What research have the designers done around this in our town? About what kind of research have you done around how the town came to be? The gold mining obviously focused around the river areas. Have you got some background information, Andrew, for that? Or you'd be looking to do further research into this if it was the identity that the town sort of...
Yes, a bit of both. A bit of both. So we have done an initial desktop amount of historical research, and we've got a whole stack of really good images from the gold rush era and the Chinese settlement and and all of the various sort of mining artifacts that come with gold, looking for gold. We've got a lot of that information. We'd love to collect any more if there are any sort of books or publications that are available. Our research to date has really just been to try and understand the beginnings of some of these cultural drivers and to understand some of the identity. As I said in the presentation, we're really, this is step one. Step two is when once we are, I guess, equipped with a stronger sense of where the community see as the priorities, then we would take it to the next level of investigation. It's definitely a very strong opportunity for the gold history to be part of the narrative that is woven through these public spaces.
That's fantastic, Andrew. I'm not sure if you can hear me here.
I can, yes.
Oh, great. Because, yeah, there's a really big connection through all of this Crown land and public land from, you know, stretching from the Harrietville Rec Reserve through to the Toronto Dredge, and even as so far as up to the Chinese digs, the clay holes, where I do know that there's a lot of community support to get a bridge up there, to create sort of walkways, to have that real integration and that, you know, real sense of feel of what it was like to actually be gold mining in this area back in those days. I think would be a really driver of that visitation and should be part of our streetscape.
Absolutely, yeah. It's one of those unique cultural markers that should be drawn upon. So yes, we're very keen to explore it further.
Oh, wonderful, because I was just not really getting the sense before of, I thought you, some of the thought process was around, I guess, removing some of that, which I thought, oh, like it's such an integrated part of Harrietville that it would be a real shame to lose it in those key areas. I know that it's spread out, but I feel that you could really grow on that.
Yep, okay, good point.
Thanks, Fiona. Robin Downey, I'm going to invite you to talk. And I believe Robin is the president, is that right, of the Historical Society? You'll have to unmute your microphone, Robin.
Yes, I am.
There we go. You can hear you now.
Thank you. Hi, Andrew.
Hello.
I'm wanting to just talk about following on from what Fiona has said, actually, that we've talked a lot about, you know, the branding for Harrietville, and obviously the origins are from gold mining, but we've also done a lot of work with our tracks and trails, and you know, part of it, the branding would be we're the gateway to the Alpine National Park and to Mount Feathertop, and so that's, it could be incorporated in the entrance to Harrietville as well. And we had a meeting on Tuesday night with a number of people just to talk about what we did want before speaking to you.
Mm-hmm.
And really out of all of that, the main focus we all thought would be in Tavaray Park and Pioneer Park, which is what you also think, so that's good. But as far as Pioneer Park and the historical monuments there or relics, I think they're very important to have pretty much all of them. But at the moment, we've just sought for and been given a quote to redo all of those signs. So okay. I don't know whether the timing is good because we haven't paid for it yet, but we have to have all of the signage updated, or not, the actual content won't be updated. Most of that will be the same, although it will be rationalised because some of it's repetitive. But it will be done in the style of Andrew Swift's style that he's done from Omeo right down through Mount Hotham and so forth. So that is what we've already planned. And if that can be incorporated into your plan, we envisaged a sort of a trail, historical trail through the village, and you've probably read the signs that are already there. So they'll be in those places, but we had thought we'd put a couple more as well.
Okay.
So I guess we'd really like some consultation around all of that.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, I think we can definitely, yeah, it'd be great, to sit down with the Historical Society and see what your plans, and I know we had already talked about this, but yeah, we would incorporate that and follow that style, because that what you're doing right now is already following a style that was sort of newly introduced, and that consistency through the plan would be really great to have all the way through town. So thank you for your question, Robin.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to John Atkins now. Just make sure you unmute yourself, John.
Good, thanks, Emily. Yeah, look, the comment I'd like to go back, follow what Fiona said earlier on. Parking, I think, is a critical issue. It has to be addressed, and you know, if you could see the town when we have markets and so forth, parking along Feathertop track becomes hazardous. The parking falls into two groups really. There's that short-term parking of people just passing through, and that probably is more easily dealt with in some respects, as long as they're not RVs and so forth. But the longer-term parking that now impacts on head of trail, and even over winter, though not this winter, of course, but in many winters, Pioneer Park tends to become, for those who don't want to park in hoys, they tend to just park in the Pioneer Park and leave their cars, and so that becomes quite a heavy parking area. I really like the idea that you came up with, extending the whole park concept down along the river into Toronto, and you know, if some form of longer term parking or even short-term parking could be created in that area, that's down. I've got my little thing here, I can't see it, but down, you know, in this area here that you've talked about, down around here, then it does provide relatively easy access into the centre of the town. It would be good for caravans and others, but it also provides head of trail, both for Bonaccord, the bungalow, and other walks into Toronto, and would provide in the summer some offset parking for the Toronto area as well, because that can be very congested from the at the top track right into the lake there. Sometimes there can be 200-300 cars, and so that's becomes an extremely congested area.
Thank you, John. That's a really good point. Yeah, as we said, parking, visitor parking, and the ability for vehicles to move safely and logically through the township is very much a part of the scope of the project.
Thanks.
Beck, it might be great to have you ask your questions to Andrew. If you can unmute, there you go.
Yeah, hi, Beck Caskey. Yeah, my questions were in relation to, you mentioned the trees and the obviously enhancing the look of those. There's a lot of trees that have to be quite severely cut back because of power cables, and is there scope to be able to put the power cable under the road as it would be safer from a fire perspective, but also would prevent the trees having to be butchered so much during the safety inspections?
I can answer the question. It's certainly something that we can investigate. The dollars really do start to add up with every metre of undergrounding of power lines. So it's one of those things that if we were starting from scratch, it would be great to have the power lines undergrounded. But certainly let's take it as a comment and see if there are areas that we can incorporate it. Again, Andrew, I think there's Francine.
Sorry to butt in there. Just wanted to make the point that we did put power underground at Port Punkah to improve the amenity of that streetscape. So it's definitely a possibility, but it is very expensive.
It is very expensive, yes.
Sorry, I've just lost it. Julie, would you like to ask your question?
Hello, can you hear me this time?
We can, thank you.
Oh, okay, great. I just wanted to ask a question about, related to the first one I asked about the bike trail. I'm just not seeing quite how this links up with other paths that are already going in and out of Harrietville. So I'm wondering about how the access from these areas links up with the Alpine walking tracks, particularly the Bonaccord track and the Bungalow Spur track, because they are a key reason why a lot of people come and visit Harrietville and stop in town. So it's lovely seeing all of these precincts linking up, but I'm wondering about links, say, up the Feathertop track to the Bungalow Spur track, or down further along the river to the Bonaccord track, because they are very, very popular.
That's a good point, Julie. Again, if it falls within the study area, then one of the really nice things would be to have all of the tracks join up, and rather than stopping and starting, to have some sense of continuity. So again, if we're talking about areas within the coloured scope here, then it's part of what we'd be looking at to try and link all of those tracks together. Outside of the study area is not part of this project. So if you're talking about tracks that are beyond this area, then that would have to be a separate project.
I think, though, Andrew, if I may say, it's Francine again, just that we would, like, one of the things I'm looking at is the Bungalow Spur track. I know is just out of the coloured area off to the right there on your plan. We certainly need to consider that sort of connection, particularly if we're providing trailhead parking in that vicinity. Then we'd look at how we connect into there. So it's not. It's a good point that we should, expand our vision a little bit to make sure we do at least provide some safe connection to those paths.
We are running out of time, so I'd like to thank everyone for their questions, and I think we've got a lot out of that, a lot of things to consider once we go into the next detail stage. But thank you very much, Andrew, for your presentation. It was really clear. The next steps will be open to a feedback period until the 2nd of August. So send in through emails, or you can call customer service and they'll put you through to me if you prefer that way. But we'd really love to hear all your feedback, especially now that you've heard Andrew walk you through the plans and explain his intent, because we want to know that the direction we're going is what the community are after, because that's what this is all about, making it a better place for the community. So please jump onto your email, info@alpineshire.vic.gov.au. A link will be put up on the Facebook page and on the website with the recording of tonight's webinar, so that people who weren't able to be here tonight can catch up, and all that information of where to send your feedback will be put up there too. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. Have a great evening. You can go and sit in front of the fire now.
Thank you.